Hello YouTube and welcome to another video from Eagles of Empire Miniatures. I really hope you're all doing well out there, enjoying your summer. In this episode we are going to give you a unit analysis of the Franc-Tireur, an irregular infantry unit that can be played as part of the Republican French faction. This video is going to dive into some of the background history for the unit. It's going to look at possible ways you can paint the unit, the miniatures, and it's also going to dive into some of the tactical aspects of how to play with this unit and optimize your gaming style, getting the most out of the unit stats, and possibly attaching a hero to boost the unit's abilities. It doesn't matter if you are new to Eagles of Empire or if you already have a few games under your belt. This video is supposed to be easy and accessible to all levels of experience with Eagles of Empire. So just lean back, grab a coffee or a cold drink, and we'll just dive into it. So I'm really excited to tell you guys some more about the Franc-Tireur. The Franc-Tireur as a troop type really caused the Germans a lot of problems during the Franco-Prussian War. They had huge challenges with these irregulars. They popped up everywhere and ambushed German supply lines and really also blurred the lines between civilians and soldiers somewhat, and created a lot of problems and fear in the German infantry. So looking at the history of the Franc-Tireur, it really the roots of this kind of unit, this kind of irregular sharpshooters, you can call them, well, it goes all the way back to the French Revolution, and it ties very much up with the Republican phase of the Franco-Prussian War, since you have some of the same dynamics coming into play after Emperor Napoleon III abdicates after losing the battle at Sedan. You have some of the same nationalistic Republican winds that blows through France and he inspires these irregular units to form up. They would come in all manners of uniforms and clothing. They could be postmen, post officers that have been rallied at the local depot. They could have been just a group of hunters or even railway workers. There was all kinds of different origins of these units. But the red line between all of these units were that they had a huge passion for France and a huge passion for defending the Republic at all cost. They would be armed with whatever they could get at the local depot. So that means that they could have the tabatier rifle, the tapping rifle, the percussion rifle system, or they could have a more modern chassepot, depending on what they could get their hands on during their initial enrollment. Many of these units, they operated in the rear of the enemy lines, and they caused, as I said earlier, huge problems to German supply lines. Some of those abilities are also reflected in the way that you'll be able to play them in a skirmish game of Eagles of Empire. They do have some special abilities that reflects the historical background, and they also have some stats that reflect the, let's say, less than normal capacity in terms of fighting ability when compared to line infantry. But all of those abilities will cover later in the unit stats part of this episode. So looking at the Franc-Tireur, they have also a really a close connection to one of the major battles in the Republican phase of the war, namely the Battle of Châteaudun, where a large contingent of Franc-Tireur had massed in the city and a German division was detached under General Wittig to clear out the Franc-Tireur. But they held on to that city for dear life, and they really frustrated the Germans. Just kept on sucking in more and more Germans into the fight over the town, and the fighting went way into the night, all around midnight, where the General Wittig finally had enough and ordered the whole town with citizens and civilians and everything to be shelled to pieces. So the Franc-Tireur have a colorful and also a bloody history in the Franco-Prussian War. They were really they frustrated the Germans to a degree where the Germans would sometimes be committing close to what we today would call war crimes, but that history would also continue during the First World War. Again, the history of the Franco-Prussian War connected very closely to the early part of World War One, where the German army that comes through Belgium, comes through northern France, would accuse civilians of being Franc-Tireurs because they were picking up arms and firing at the Germans. So Franc-Tireurs they're a intricate part of the Franco-Prussian War, and a really interesting unit or units really to read more about. They would all of them, the units would have a local DNA, so they would be from a certain area. Again, that is also depicted in the way that they uniformed themselves, or they named themselves. They could be Franc-Tireurs de la Presse. They could be from newspaper workers. They could be Franc-Tireurs de la Mort, the death squad. That particular unit had skulls embroidered on their tunics and so on. So you'd have all these uniforms customized by the soldiers or their wives and so on, and it really creates a colorful experience and a colorful dimension to a Franco-Prussian war game. So let's jump on over and have a look at how the Franc-Tireur looks in terms of gaming stats when you're going to play this unit in a skirmish game of Eagles of Empire. So Franc-Tireur have some different stats compared to line infantry. But if you look at the top right corner, you would have you see the value in command points that you have to pay to recruit a squad of Franc-Tireurs. That is 3 command points, so that is the same as if you would be recruiting line infantry. But the trade-off really is you're going to get some different stats and some different abilities rather than line infantry. So let's go through them and let's have a look at what the Franc-Tireur offers you as a player, a gamer of the French faction. Movement rate 8 inches. If you compare that to the standard movement rate of line infantry of only 6 inches, well, you get a 33% bonus here. That is largely because the Franc-Tireur would be local units. They would know the local area, there were no shortcuts in the terrain, and they would be lightly armored and more nimble and light-footed. So they are a more mobile unit on the gaming table. But that's not all. They do have some really fantastic tactical abilities when we go look at special abilities later. But more on that is coming later. So let's have a look at the rifle, a chassepot, standard equipment for French line infantry. Again, they could be armed with lighter weapons like a tabatiere, as I mentioned earlier. That would be an 18-inch weapon range, but here on the unit card we've added the chassepot. It's really up to how you want to play them, but they would be in some cases armed with chassepot, in some cases armed with tabatiere, even in some cases they would be armed with older muskets, smoothbores and so on. It's again depending on what they could get their hands on at the depot. If you look at the firepower, well, 2d6, which is 1d6 less than line infantry. So they are somewhat less efficient in a firefight, which again reflects the unit not being drilled and formed in a normal capacity. These are volunteers that picked up arms against the Germans, and they will be less efficient during the heat of battle in terms of a firefight. And even more so when we look at the charge value of this unit. So a normal line infantry would have a 3d6 charge value. The Franc-Tireurs, well, they're just not meant for hand-to-hand combat with the enemy. The unit has no prior military drilling, and it's not a punchy unit at all. This is a skirmish unit that's meant to be at the distance from the enemy, harassing the enemy, shooting at the enemy, and flanking or going in the rear of the enemy. It's not your frontline unit that's gonna take on the Germans head to head. So 1d6 in charge value, I mean, they if you stack them up, perhaps they can do some damage, but I would not recommend going into hand-to-hand with these guys. If you look at the defensive value, well, they do have a pretty decent defense actually, again reflecting that they are going to use terrain, they're going to use shortcuts, they are going to stay hidden and in cover, and they're not going to face the enemy head to head. So they'll roll a 2d6 defense value here, and so they could potentially take some punishment in a hand-to-hand, but still I would really recommend having them stay out of any close combat on the gaming table. Unit strength of 3, which is also standard for all infantry units. So let's jump down to special abilities and have a look at what the Franc-Tireur offers you. Well, if you look at the tree icon all the way to the left, that is standard for all infantry. It means that this unit can cross through rough terrain like woods and so on. It also has the house icon, which means that it can enter buildings, and yeah, this is an infantry ability. Again, artillery and cavalry does not have this kind of ability, of course. Entering buildings and so on is restricted for infantry. Now comes the interesting part. These are the abilities that really sets the Franc-Tireur out as a unique and fantastic unit to play if you are playing the Republican French faction. And that is this circular zone kind of icon, number 3 from the left, which is called local militia. And it goes like this. This unit knows its way around the battle area. It can deploy directly onto the table, but not nearer than 12 inches from any tactical objective, enemy unit, or enemy deployment zone. So this unit can deploy directly onto the gaming table. Even at the farthest end away from your deployment zone, they could pop up, they could flank, they could rear your enemy, they can come in from any side really. You only have to be observing those restrictions in terms of proximity to tactical objectives and enemy deployment zone and so on. So they could really harass the enemy. They can just pop up off the ground next to a German unit in the rear of the German lines and ambush them. So that is really what you pay the 3 command points for. They're not your heavy brawlers, but they can really harass the German line of defense, and they can kind of offset where the front line on the gaming table is. Finally, they have the icon all the way to the right. The little wall with a plus means that these are expert skirmishers, and they will treat all light cover as heavy cover. Now, heavy cover means you get 2 extra defense die when you are in cover. So the unit potentially, if they are in light or heavy cover, they will have 4 defense dice to roll, which really makes them hard to target unless you're firing with artillery, which cancels all cover. So again, this unit has a lot of potential on the gaming table. They can really be a game winner, I would say, for the Republican French faction. German, as a German player, you will have a lot, a very much a different game playing against the Republican French than you would have against the Imperial French, where you would have some of the more traditional way of facing each other. Here you are in the Republican phase of the war, you are deep, deep, deep inside France, you are in the Loire Valley or you are in the Northwest and so on, and you are going to get ambushed by franc-tireurs. So you'd have to work that into the way that you are playing against the Republican French, because you know you're going to potentially meet some of these guys, and they do defend pretty well. They're not going to jump up and bite you in close combat, but they'll be harassing you from a distance, and they do fire at a pretty decent 2d6. So franc-tireurs, well, as a standard purchase of 3 command points, I would say this unit is highly valuable for the French Republican player. So let's jump over and have a look at the hero that you can attach to the franc-tireurs, namely Commandant Lipovsky, who's a really interesting historical figure and one of my personal favorites from the Franco-Prussian War. Yeah, let's have a look at the hero Commandant Lipovsky. Commandant Lipovsky is perhaps best known for his defense of Châteaudun. He was the leading commander that took the fight and the brawl with Wittig at Châteaudun, and he was extremely inspirational in the defense of the city, and a key personality inspiring the troops to really give it all there at Châteaudun. He also had a run at the Germans at the siege of Paris, where he raided. He made an exit and raided the German lines and actually captured some cavalry horses from I think it was Holstein cavalry or something like this. He was quite a character. No small amount of bravery there, and of course this guy is an integrated hero in our gaming system, and anything else would just not be the justice to this guy. So Commandant Lipovsky has an interesting special ability. Like all heroes, you can attach him to a unit, a particular unit, and he will then grant that unit and other units, which is specified on his hero card, a special ability that would boost their effect on the gaming table. So let's have a look at Commandant Lipovsky's special ability. It's called Fire at Will, and it goes like this. Commandant Lipovsky inspired a stern defense of Châteaudun. As long as Lipovsky is on the table, all franc-tireur squads, so each squad, have a firepower of 3d6. Attach the hero to franc-tireurs. Okay, so that means that your franc-tireur squads on the table, normally shooting at a 2d6, now will have a 3d6. They are extremely well suited to defending themselves. They have the heavy cover bonus, they already have a 2d6 defense die roll, and now you can boost their firepower to 3d6 per squad. So if you're running a few squads of franc-tireurs, well, I think it's worth adding, spending those 4 command points and adding Commandant Lipovsky to your list here on the table. Perhaps he is he's best suited in games where you're going to use 3 or more squads of franc-tireurs. So it's depending on your gaming style and the scenario that you're playing. But if you're going to use, and you'll be continually losing units as you go along, and you need to recruit more. Anybody who's played a game of Eagles of Empire know that the one of the key challenges of the game is to keep control of the tactical objectives, to get units from your deployment zone and up to where the fighting is. So using the special ability of the franc-tireurs is going to really give you a huge upside into that problem. and now you can boost your Franktireurs further by adding Commandant Lipovsky. So I think he's a worthy buy, and a certainly is something that I would recommend you to try out if you'd like playing and gaming with the Franktireurs in your particular gaming style. So yeah, so overall I would say that try out the Franktireurs. If you haven't tried them out, give them a spin. I think you will you'll definitely take your opponent by surprise when your unit starts popping up all over the table, 12 inches away from the nearest tactical objectives. It means with your movement rate of 8, you'll be there within the next round. You'll be close enough to contest or to claim the tactical objectives. Is gonna create hell on earth for from your opponent. So yeah, give these guys a spin. They're fun to game with, and they're fun to paint because of the many different painting schemes you can use. You can go on Google and just search for Franktireurs, and you will have a huge amount of different uniforms to choose from. The ones that I have here in this episode, they're actually the ones that participated in the Battle of Châteaudun. So I went with those ones, yeah, when I painted it, the units. And I went with a little bit of autumn leaves and frosty ground here, as I want to again pay homage to the autumn and winter battles of the Franco-Prussian War, where the Franktireurs saw their action. So yeah, I hope this was informative and inspiring for you, and we'll be back soon with more videos. I think we are going to continue this series of unit analysis, because I think it gives you a nice overview and insight onto how to boost your gaming style with the different units available for each faction. Please post any questions you have in the comments below, and I'll be happy to answer. And yeah, enjoy your hobby. I hope you get some good games in out there, and see you soon. Bye bye.